Welcome to Kidlit Catalyst. Today's guests are Kendra Levin and Alyssa Henkin.
My favorite piece of advice to give to writers is also probably my simplest piece of advice, which is close your computer, step away from your desk, go outside and take a walk. Get your body moving, get out of the space that you're in and be outside in the world, and remember that there's a whole world out there, and just get a little bit of space from your work.
Why are you here? What is that thing that just keeps pulling at you? I just think when you're following that really deep voice and, that one that just doesn't let up, and the thing that you just love most in the world, that's why you're doing this.
Welcome to Kidlit Catalyst. We've been having such a good time chattering that we had to just break into the bios and share with you who you get to meet today. Introducing editor, author, and certified life coach, Kendra Levin, who has worked in the publishing industry for nearly 20 years. She's not only an editorial director of Simon & Schuster books for young readers, say that 3 times fast, but has also worked with Penguin Random House and Scholastic. And she has edited New York Times bestsellers and award winners across all age categories for children's books. A regular contributor to Psychology Today, Kendra is the author of self-help book, The Hero Is You, and has spent over a decade coaching writers and other creative artists. And Alyssa Henkin is here today, and she founded Birch Path Literary after fulfilling her childhood dream to move to New York and work with books. Her path? She earned her bachelor's degree in English from the University of Pennsylvania and landed a job in editorial at Simon & Schuster books for young readers. And at S&S, she learned about the rapid flourishing Kidlit market from the wisest of colleagues, quote. And while she cultivated a list of best-selling and multi-award winning children's book authors, today she brings all of her experience to Soul, proprietorship, and you should know that the soul is spelled S-O-U-L, and values professional integrity, optimism, and passion. Welcome, ladies. We're so glad you're here with us today on Kidlit Catalyst.
Well, thanks for having us.
Yay. Thank you.
So I'm guessing you two have had your paths cross in this world that's actually smaller than people realize.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, we have had the pleasure of working together with one of my very favorite authors, Julie Berry.
Julie Berry is one of my very favorite authors too. She's amazing. And Kendra's been an incredible editor and champion for her. I think it's almost been 10 years now, because I remember selling Julie's first YA to Kendra, which she preempted in the spring of 2012. And here we are, nearly in 2022.
Wow. Time.
Wow.
Yeah.
I love that it's so memorable that you have the date right at the tip of your tongue.
Yeah. It is really impressive.
I have one of those goofy memories that I can remember what I ate when my family went to England when I was 8 years old in 1984. And it serves me well for recollecting deals as well. So don't ask me where the kids' shoes are. That spatial memory is not as strong, but that kind of oral memory is strong.
Wow.
What you do, right? What makes her your favorite? Both of your favorites. What is it that makes her a favorite?
I just said one of my favorites. Of course, we can't have favorites.
One of, sorry.
But I will say that one of the things that I've really loved about working with Julie Berry as her editor is that she's a real writer's writer. I mean, she thinks very deeply about craft. She went to the Vermont College MFA program, and she's really just always trying to continue to increase her knowledge and gain more expertise on different areas of craft. And she always wants to do something new, and she really, really challenges herself. And so her work is a wonderful challenge for me editorially. And I mean that in the best way. It really brings out my best work, and it really pushes me to push myself. And then also she's just a truly lovely person.
Yes, Julie is one of those authors. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. No
I was
apology.
going to say Julie is one of those authors who, as Kendra said, she's a real pro and she's very erudite and knowledgeable and does a lot of research and pushes her craft. But she's also an amazing marketer. And she actually just opened her own bookstore earlier this year. I'll give a little shout out to Author's Note in Medina, New York. And she's such a crackerjack, charismatic person. It's like you just put her in front of, marketing, publicity, any of that kind of thing. And she really has a gift for that as well as for the craft itself.
Wow, that's cool. No, what I was going to say was that whole thing about Kendra, you mentioned challenge. And I love that, because it's like, if there isn't a challenge, it's like, it's not possible to have all the joy, when you're creating. It's like, it's almost like, it reminds me of like, when I was a skier, I had the most fun if I was like right at the edge of what I could do, and it's kind of like writing is like that too. And you pointed right at that with talking about Julie there.
Yeah, well, I think for writers and artists, and then I think also for editors and agents, because we're all involved in creative work in different capacities, we really relish having our creativity be called upon and sort of pushing ourselves to find ways that we can innovate and ways that we can just try to do something that hasn't quite been done in that way before. And I think that's what draws artists to be artists, I think, in part. And I think that for people like agents and editors, it's part of what draws us to be in a creative field that, has its upsides and downsides. But one of the upsides is that we get to use that part of our brain.
Yeah, it's quite a balance, isn't it? I mean, you really are like hitting the extremes when you talk about sides of the brain.
I've
We're
been playing
lucky,
this
though.
app. Oh, go ahead, Alyssa.
I was just going to say I think we're lucky because it is kind of the extreme sides of the brain, but there's so few people that really kind of get to be in this little community of ours. It's difficult, it's a long path and it's a hard way in, but just to be able to, work with books for a living is a true privilege.
Yeah, I completely agree. I've been playing this app on my phone lately, which is a jigsaw puzzle. And when you get the piece in the right place, it makes this satisfying little click. And it reminds me of writing. Every time it does it, it reminds me of when I find that right word or that perfect phrase. It's just like click. You just know it when it hits, right? And it's just like that. Yeah, it's so satisfying to get it right. Feel that moment of clarity.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, totally. In fact, that's our, my husband's a musician. And so a lot of our stuff that we've done, our business name is Puzzle Piece Arts. And we've talked about that. It's that finding those pieces and how they fit together.
Yeah. When you feel that something just sneak into place, it's like, that's the best feeling.
Well, it's very intuitive. And I think that's one of the places where sometimes the field of publishing can get really tricky because writing is so intuitive, making art is so intuitive. And for editors and agents, there's the part of what we do that has to really connect with that. And then there's the place where art meets commerce. And we also have to, have a business head and be looking at things not just from a purely creative standpoint, but on behalf of the publishing house or on behalf of the agency. And sort of juggling all that is one of the things that keeps this job interesting for sure, but it can be one of the more fraught parts of the job too.
Definitely. Like when I first became an agent, paranormal manuscripts were really popular. And that genre isn't really my first love, but you kind of would look to submissions with an eye to, is this going to sell? Is this going to sell? But what I found over the years is, there is that commerce part of it, and it's a big part of it. And as much as we might all want to be creative mavericks, that may or may not be met on the other side with enthusiasm. But I have found that being intuitive, as Kendra was saying, and really following what makes you tick will ultimately, I think bucking the trend, it's hard to do, but it can be so gratifying when you can do it.
Yeah.
Well, and my goal is always to start a trend rather than to follow a trend. And starting a trend is not easy to do. And so that's sort of like a once in a lifetime if you're lucky. But that is how I try to think about the books that I choose to publish.
It's a great way to look at it.
Mm-hmm. How do you know when you've found one of your clients or one of the books you want to take on?
I think it's just you can't say no. You're just so enthusiastic and so excited. It has reached you in a very deep place. I remember right after my younger son, William, was born, I got a query letter from one of my dear clients, Ruth Behar, and it was about her book, Lucky Broken Girl, which was published in 2015, or I'm sorry, 2017. I received this query in 2014. And it somehow reminded me of All of a Kind Family, which was one of my favorite books when I was a kid, only it wasn't about turn of the century Jewish immigrants on the Lower East Side. It was about Ruth's family's experience coming over from Cuba in the 1960s, but kind of that melting pot story of a Jewish immigrant girl just spoke so deeply to me that even though I was on maternity leave, I was like, I have to read this. And I felt this just very deep connection. And it's so easy to just say no because the volume of queries and submissions is high. But when something really calls to you, that for me is always a sign that, I should follow that lead.
Mm.
Yeah, there's definitely something intuitive about finding that connection with a submission. And for me, it's been interesting these past couple of years. I've been at Simon & Schuster just a little over 2 years in this role. And I'm editorial director of our biggest trade imprint. It's kind of our flagship imprint. And I manage a team of 8 editors. And so I have a lot of responsibility in addition to editing manuscripts. And I have to be really kind of more selective than I've ever been about what I take on, particularly because in addition to all of that, I've also inherited a number of authors that were already on our list. And so when I'm evaluating submissions, I'm sort of thinking on a few different levels, one of which is about our imprint holistically. What are the holes in our list? Is this something that we really don't have enough of, whether it's the format or the age level or the subject matter? Is this something that's not being sort of fully represented on our list, particularly because we're a real generalist imprint? We do all ages, we do all genres. We really do a little bit of everything. So I want to make sure that we're keeping the full spectrum there. So I'm thinking about the bigger picture needs of the group, in addition to my own personal taste. And do I personally love this? And is it something that I feel would be able to, because of all the responsibility that I have, can I fit this in? Do I have the bandwidth for it? And do I love it so much that I want to kind of create the bandwidth for it?
I love that.
Yeah, and even for the book creators, it's kind of the same thing too. It's like I can play with ideas, and sometimes my brain is just all over the place, and then it's like nobody could say what I do unless they're talking about one little part of it, because I go all over the place. But then you have to zero in on, so what is really speaking to me, or what's coming from who I truly am or want to be, instead of just because I can do this, should I,
It's really interesting to hear it from the author's perspective, because I've been doing this new thing lately. One of my clients tapped me off to all these read aloud picture books on YouTube, especially during the pandemic. A lot of authors started reading their work. So when the library was closed and you couldn't get to the library, you can just press a video. So every day I've just been listening to a different picture book, because it kind of just keeps my brain in that place. And the one thing that often stands out for me about these, books that are published and in some cases very celebrated, is just how beautiful they are, but also kind of how simple, how these big, complex, wavy things have been whittled down. But the drafts don't start like that. They start, as you were saying, with so much complexity that you kind of have to follow.
Mm-hmm.
Totally.
Yeah.
And Deb, I appreciate what you said about, just because I can write this, does that mean that I should write this? And I think something that I always encourage writers to really be thinking about a lot in their process, in the early stages of their process is what are their reasons for wanting to write this particular project, and to kind of invest themselves in it, and beyond just like, oh, well, I had an idea and I like that idea. What are some deeper reasons that you would have to write about this subject matter, to sort of stick with this story over the time that it's going to take and the effort that it's going to take to investigate it and explore it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, sometimes it's really hard to answer that too. Sometimes you get pulled by an idea and you just can't even, why this one? Why can't I let go? It takes some time to really tease out what it is that's grabbing you about that. But you have to do it in order to succeed and make it relevant. You have to, I think, identify what that personal connection is. And it can take some time and some playing around.
Boy, I could be a whole lot better at that, because it's kind of like, oh, this looks like fun. Let me just go do this. It truly is that shiny thing that they talk about.
But you need that too. You need that sense of play and adventure as well to find it. Yeah.
You absolutely need a sense of play, and also at the same time, I think it's like the way you're describing that, Deb, makes me think of when you're sort of like eyeballs deep in some project that you're getting a bit sick of, and then you come up with another idea and you're like, oh, I'm just going to chase this for a little while, and that's sort of part of the interrogation that I think people need to do on themselves, is like, oh, is this just like an excuse for me to not follow through on something that I've reached a challenging point with?
Like digging out those drafts of the novels, that I've never shown anyone, Yeah.
And yet you need those drafts. Like I love things like NaNoWriMo and 12 by 12. And in theory, I was talking to a client of mine last week about 12 by 12. And she's like, man, it's a lot of pressure, to get 12 manuscripts out. And yet, there you also, it's kind of, which one to chase, but also just kind of sitting at your desk every day and showing up and getting the words down like that from where I'm sitting is huge in and of itself, because, I can go on emails, I can chase payments, I can review contracts. I have all sorts of like kind of businessy things to do. But for the people in the writing trenches, I mean, it's deep stuff that's kind of staring back at you.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah.
What I love about Kidlit is that it really is coming to the juice. So it's really squeezing it down until you're at the essence. So that's what I love about it. If you're doing nonfiction, you're really learning so much in a really short period of time as you read it. And as you study it, you've got this immense amount of data that you're squeezing down. And I love that about Kidlit. For any age, I think Kidlit is fascinating for that reason. But it's being in the squeeze. Is it time to be creating and adding all the pulp, or are you in the squeeze zone? And sometimes that's uncomfortable because you have to let some of your very favorite things step aside because it's not serving the work. But I love that. I love that about writing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What would you say is the advice you give most to the writers that you work with?
That's a good question.
What do we need to hear?
What
do you wish you could say once and never say again?
I will say,
how many things do I have to tell you?
my favorite piece of advice to give to writers is also probably my simplest piece of advice, which is close your computer, step away from your desk, go outside and take a walk. I think so often it's easy to just get kind of sucked into spirals in your work and lose the forest for the trees and kind of like be in your own little world with it. And sometimes you just need to get your body moving, get out of the space that you're in, and be outside in the world, and remember that there's a whole world out there, and just get a little bit of space from your work.
That applies to agents too. I just want to say I never get offers when I'm sitting at my desk. It's always on trains, at the grocery store. It's always when you're living your life that the magic happens. But I always just stick with kind of that passion. Like, why are you here? What is that thing that just keeps pulling at you? One of my proudest things is when authors say to me, you never encourage me to write the book that's gonna sell. You encourage me to write the book that's in my heart. And I do stand by that, because I feel like oftentimes to buck those trends, to do those things that other people aren't doing, they can be difficult when you're kind of starting out. But I just think when you're following that really deep voice, and that one that just doesn't let up, and the thing that you just love most in the world, that's why you're doing this. So I kind of stand by the passion.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Remembering, who you are, and what you stand for, and yeah. Thanks for that.
It can be so hard to do. Yeah, those are both great advice. It can be so hard to do that. We talked about how you have to balance it, and authors are balancing too, like what's going to sell. And so yeah, we do play those mind games with ourselves, where I think often the things that we feel the most passionate about feel weird and maybe not like they're not going to resonate with people out there. So we do tend to self-censor ourselves a lot, I think. And sometimes those passions that call to us feel a little too personal, maybe. So yeah, we're balancing those things as well, and it can be really tricky.
And it's a long game too. That's something that I think, people, all of us, the agents, the editors, the writers need to remember, because, that passionate idea might, like you said, be a little tricky with the kind of the commerce part of it, but don't let it go away. Keep it in there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's not everything has to work all at once. And there are definitely trends and climates that serve things better than others. And, but I think just being mindful of the passion, whether you pursue it at that second or not, is important.
Yeah.
I think too, something that's good for writers to think about, while, we never sort of want to encourage somebody to put the cart before the horse. And I think that what you want to write absolutely has to come first. I also think that it's good for writers to like jump several steps ahead mentally, and to think, how would I feel about having this project attached to my name for the rest of my life? Is this something that I want to live with and be known for forever? Because when you take a book seriously, if it does end up getting published, it's like a kind of a marriage. I mean, you're really entering into a long-term relationship with that book. And I think it's a valuable part of the creative process to sort of be thinking about, is this something that I want to sort of become a part of my identity in the long term?
Mm-hmm.
That is how I audition ideas frequently. Like, can I picture myself being excited about doing a school visit about this book? Like, can I picture myself, how would I market this? How would I talk about it? Does it feel exciting, or does it feel blah?
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I narrow that all those ideas down a little bit very often. Yeah.
It always amazes me how many times people come up with projects and things that are like things that have been with them their whole life. If you think back to like when you're a little kid and the things you found interesting and wanted to do, it's like I was a really outdoors kiddo, and then ended up doing some environmental education stuff for teachers and things like that. But it was just in the last couple of years I started like being more interested in doing like, nonfiction picture books that are, kind of nature related. And it was like, well, of course, that was who I was. But, then there's also, the other things that come up, and it's interesting, sometimes even like working with creativity coaching clients, if they going back to, it's kind of like there's always this little part of us that knows who we are even then. Although that's another thing I remember as a kid thinking, why am I me? Like, why am I in this body and not in that one? And so then there's those kinds of topics that fascinate me. So,
Well,
When
I
I
think
was
very few people who come to this field, whether it's as an author or as an editor or an agent or any number of things, I think very few of us come to it without some interest in psychology. I think that being fascinated by people and why we do the things that we do, and what makes us who we are, and kind of our identities, and how we're shaped by our environments and by the people in our lives. I think all of that has to really totally fascinate you if you're going to be in this field.
when I was 10 years old, I had discovered the Betsy Tacy series. And at that point, and this was the late 1980s, a lot of the books were out of print, but my mom had a friend in the book business and she was able to get some copies for me. And between that and the library, we cobbled things together. And after I had read, I think it was Heaven to Betsy about her freshman year of high school, which is, all about Deep Valley, Minnesota at the turn of the century, based on Mankato, where I later visited. And I marched into my sister, who was 14 at the time's bedroom. And I said, I want a job where I can study American towns when I grow up. And I remember it like it was yesterday. I felt it so intently. And my sister is an endocrinologist. And even at 14, she was like, I don't know, you'll have to go into academia or something. I'm not really sure what to tell you. And then I just kind of bursted out of the room. But as I said to my mom not long ago, I have done a number of, picture book biographies and historical fiction. So in a way, I kind of did find that job for myself where I could study American towns. And I'll never forget that, because that was really, I think, the first time that I had this strong sense of my identity. And my sister actually later told me to go to law school when I was a young editor in my 20s. And I'm glad I didn't listen to her about that either. I mean, I love her to pieces, but sometimes when you're in a creative field, it's not, sometimes it can be really wonderful and remunerative, and sometimes it can be more of a struggle. But I'm glad I stayed the course, and I'm glad that I never kind of forgot that initial kind of moment.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, that's one of the things I love about my job. And I think it's the case for editors and for agents and for writers, is that you get to learn about so many different topics and discover so many different areas, particularly in nonfiction, but in fiction too. I mean, just all the different worlds that I've gotten to visit in different novels and subjects I've gotten to learn about, historical periods I've gotten to learn about. I mean, I think when you're a person who's curious about the world, working with books is such a great pleasure, because it's like being in school all the time, but at a sort of with very specific subjects
that you get to choose, right?
Yeah.
It's true.
Yeah.
So practically, can I ask you a question that I admit is a little personal, related to me? But how long do you think, I think others would be interested, how long do you think you should wait when an editor has requested a manuscript and you haven't heard back from them? So they talked with you, they decided they wanted to see this, they asked for it. How long do you wait until you nudge them? And how would you suggest that they nudge?
just a little addition to that. That one's an adult one, so the answer might be a little different.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
It's hard to have a one size fits all for that question. And I think particularly in the times that we're living in, ever since the beginning of the pandemic coming to the US in early 2020, I think what might have been considered standard timeframes, even though I would still be pretty vague, are kind of out the window. And I think we're all still trying to evaluate where we are, what we're capable of, how much we can handle at any given time. A lot of things have changed so much about our workflow. I know that every editor that I know has seen a dramatic increase in volume of just the emails that we receive. And that's been really challenging to manage. Just the ways that we communicate are changing. The ways that we do our jobs are changing. So I offer all that not as an excuse of like why it might take a long time, but just to provide a little bit of context for what any given editor who might be considering a project may be contending with. Not to mention, of course, that people still have family members that are getting ill and dying of COVID. So so with all of that as a backdrop, it's really hard to give a specific time frame. And I think the only answer I can really give you is that it takes as long as it takes. Alyssa, I don't know if you sort of have.
Yeah, you're so wise, Kendra. It's that life coach vibe. I'm like, yeah, I'll have what she's having. But I was going to say a month or two, just because, you know, where I'm sitting, it never hurts to send an email. And I mean, I completely echo what Kendra was saying, because I've, you know, a couple of my clients lately just talking about submission timeframes. And I'm very proud that I've sold a number of books this year, but I have noticed that the time frame from like submission to sale was longer in many cases. So I do think that a lot of people are working from home. Like you said, you never know what's going on with people's family members, people's health. These are very difficult times. And I think the holiday season is particularly challenging. I'm not even doing a lot of follow-ups currently, just because I feel like, you know, what Kendra was saying about like the volume of emails, I sort of feel like better to kind of approach in January when people are a little bit more in that I've cleaned up my inbox frame of mind. And I, you know, because I think that tends to happen in the new year, and December can just be a bit of an abyss in general. But I also echo what Kendra said, it takes as long as it takes. And I don't know, but I also feel like when you do hear back, you're not going to be sitting at your desk. You're going to be, you know, at the gym or wrapping presents or, you know, whatever. It's just, you know, the universe kind of has its own timeline on those things. One of the authors that I worked with at Simon & Schuster, I remember she had sent out so many query letters. And I think when I finally did make her an offer on her very first picture book, like one of her kids was injured and they were driving to the emergency room. And it was like, and she had this bell that she was going to ring when she got that offer. She was going to ring her symbolic bell, and that never happened. So
I was in the tub when I got my first book offer.
wow.
Close enough to the shower. Yeah, she nailed it.
Yeah, I was walking the dog.
I will say, I think the best antidote to the tension of waiting and that anticipation and the anxiety around that is to wholeheartedly focus on a different project.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Great advice. This has been such a joy to get your wisdom and to hear some of your experiences. This has been a particularly lovely engagement. We usually stop with a lightning round question, and this time I don't even have one. So I'll leave it to one of you to give.
You put me on the spot last time, so this is Deb's.
I don't know. I think, how about if they share whatever they were going to share that we didn't cover yet?
Ooh, I like it.
Or is there anything else, Celeste or Laurie, you want to share? There's some options. How's that?
Good one.
Otherwise, you know, I am, you know, keeping this book on my lap here right now, and we might want to just mention this lovely book by Kendra.
I appreciate the plug, Deb. Thank you. So this is my book, The Hero Is You. It's a self-help book for writers and other creative artists about how to have a sort of like a more holistically engaged creative process that fits in with your life. And I think that it's a book that, I mean, I don't want to be like, it makes a great holiday gift, but I do think it makes a great holiday gift because I've heard from a number of people sort of every year. I tend to hear from people around when the year is turning, because it is a time when people are sort of thinking about their lives and their creative lives in a different way, and how can they kind of set up some best practices for themselves to make sure that they're able to really pursue the things that they want to accomplish, and also to make sure that they are prioritizing self-care in their own creative process. And that's something, especially this year, especially these last couple of years, that I would really encourage every writer and creative artist to be thinking about is how can I be making sure that my creative process is one that is integrated with my own care of myself, rather than being somehow in opposition to it.
I will echo that and say, first of all, that Kendra's incredible and the book is incredible. And with the year turning, now is the time to definitely, kind of focus on that whole holistic aspect of the creative process. But something that I struggle with now, and I feel like, I don't know if it's because of the pandemic, is just there's so many books to keep on top of and to keep track of, and Twitter conversations, and, just like terms that change. Things seem to be happening so quickly, and there's so much content, and it can be really challenging to just keep on top of all that content. So that's one of the reasons that I have been doing the one picture book a day. And I have found audiobooks to be really helpful, listening sometimes even to submissions. I have an app on my phone so I can listen while I'm walking and practicing that self-care. But I feel like it's important for writers to know that, don't worry so much about the noise, kind of worry about like the inner calling. And as Kendra said, the self-care, because there is a lot to keep on top of. And I think you can sort of feel drowned when you try to do that. So, whatever kind of things you're hearing or seeing that are intriguing you, focus on small steps and not feeling like you need to kind of know everything in every second.
Oh, that is so me. Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
It's
that's huge.
I keep putting all these books on hold at the library, and then I come get my big stack and wonder, well, how am I going to get through these before they're due? Yep.
Yeah, there's so much to follow.
Discernment.
You have FOMO, right? Fear of missing out on which
Oh my goodness. No, it's not even that.
If it's creative FOMO, do we call it COMO? Is that like that thing that we coined on this podcast?
There you go.
Well, Alyssa, you took on a really courageous shift by going to your own sole proprietorship. When you took on that shift, do you have any advice? Because a lot of creative people do shifts from one career to another, from one type of focus to another, from one, both of you have done a lot of shifts. Do you have any advice on shift points, on things to be aware of, things that you learned along the way about those transitions? There's a lot of transition today.
Yeah, I mean, it was a really big decision for me to start my own agency, and it was not one that I, took lightly. I did a lot of research. I talked to a lot of people. I definitely tried to leave no stone unturned, so to speak. And I'm so grateful that I did it. It was such the right move for me at the point in my life and in my career where I am. And it's been all good, but I still just continue to learn so much. And, if there's one piece of advice that I could give, it sounds very cliche, but there's never a perfect time to do anything maverick like that. It's like, I picked a time that felt right, but there are times where it can feel overwhelming and daunting. And I haven't even been through my first tax season yet. So I may be, saying something entirely different after April 15th or so forth. But I think there's never a perfect time to take a leap, but do your research and just, kind of just know yourself. I'm also a very risk averse person, and starting a venture is just by nature a very risk averse thing, but I tried to do it in the way that felt the least risky to me. So.
Well, yeah, and I would add to that, Alyssa, I think that's really good advice. And I would add to that, because I've also gone through some interesting shifts in the last few years. I came to Simon & Schuster after 14 years at Penguin. That was a big, big change. And then this past year, I moved to Seattle, and I'm now working from the West Coast.
You're right. We could have met
How did
in
we not
person.
know that?
So when you're ready for your Whidbey Island tour, come on out.
That would be amazing. Yeah, it's still very new, and just sort of trying it out. But from all of that, I mean, what I have taken away as far as what I've learned or advice that I might have about big transitions, one is that like you just might not know for sure, and you may make the decision not knowing for sure if it's the right thing. And I don't think it's realistic to expect that you'll be in a place where you'll be like, every fiber of my being is ready to make this change. And then the other thing I would say about it is that I think the greatest bellwether for knowing whether you want to go for an opportunity or make a change is just whether you feel like it's an opportunity for personal growth. The decision to leave Penguin was a really tough one for me. I worked there since I was an editorial assistant. I had a lot of really, really close connections to the people there, which I still do. I felt really invested in Viking children's books, the imprint that I worked at, and really kind of just deep roots there. And not a lot of reasons that I wanted to leave, except that I had worked there for 14 years and was excited about the opportunity to experience some personal growth through seeing what I would be like working in a different place and in a different role. And I'm really, really grateful that I made that change, even though there are things I miss about particularly the people there. But I've also met some really wonderful people at Simon & Schuster who I probably wouldn't have connected with otherwise. And it's just been an opportunity to step into kind of the next chapter of myself. And so I think that if you're contemplating a big change and you're not sure about it, that's the place that I would look to, is this sort of question of whether it feels like an opportunity for personal growth, and also whether you feel like you're in a place where you're ready to have some personal growth.
Yeah. And, both of you mentioned just the whole thing of the not knowing before you get there, and how you have to just step into it to find out and learn, and so often people will say, well, I could never do, blah, blah, blah. I don't know anything about it. It's like, nobody who does that knew anything about it when they began, it's like, and that's the research that Alyssa talked about too, where you can check it out, but still you can't really know until you're there. It's that whole thing about creativity where, you got to be comfortable in the chaos of the not knowing. And that's really where the good stuff comes from.
Love that.
Comfortable with the chaos. Yep. Well said.
And there's always chaos, isn't there, Laurie?
I would say comfortable with the chaos and willing to sometimes be uncomfortable. I mean, I think that comfort is sometimes overrated. And I think that sometimes to do our best work, or to be, to get into that next chapter of ourselves, we have to be willing to experience some discomfort.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well said.
I love this. What a great conversation. Wise women all. Thank you for your time today. I hope we get to do it again soon.
Thank you. Great to meet you all. Have a great weekend, everyone.